Disclaimer. Please be advised. I am fully aware of the possibility that I could be completely wrong about all of this. The question is, do all the people making the claims about alien invasion acknowledge and accept that they could be totally wrong about all of it too? Occam's razor, yo. Let's fire things up and get into it. This is the Almost Daily ZenCast. Hello, and namaste. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's get started. Hello and namaste, dear friends, and welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And today we're going to be talking about the recent escalation in hubbub and noise and chatter on the interwebs and social media about the grand alien invasion that has yet to manifest itself. It's been eminently forthcoming for decades, and yet they seem to be dragging their alien feet. Before we begin, let's take a moment to make sure we're all on the same page and understand what skepticism is, because I am officially speaking from a skeptic's standpoint. Now, a lot of people instantly get triggered by that word and presume, often incorrectly, that a skeptic is going to categorically reject and deny anything and everything they don't want to agree with just for the sake of maintaining their own worldview. That's not what skepticism is at all. That's called, maintaining your biases, or I'm sure there's a technical term for it, but plenty of people misunderstand or misuse the term. So let's take a moment to consider what it actually means. Now, of course, we could bust out a dictionary. I've got a couple sitting around. We could ask the interwebs. I went ahead for shits and giggles, and I went and visited OpenAI's possessive apostrophe S chat GPT and asked it to define for me skepticism. Here is what it spat back. Skepticism is a philosophical attitude characterized by a questioning approach to knowledge and truth claims. It involves being cautious, critical, and open-minded when evaluating information and arguments, especially those that are not well established or that are controversial. The goal of skepticism is to assess the evidence for a claim and determine the most reasonable explanation based on that evidence. Skepticism can be applied to many areas of inquiry, including science, religion, politics, and personal beliefs. A skeptical approach encourages individuals to look for evidence to support or refute a claim, and to avoid blindly accepting information or arguments without questioning their validity. Put an asterisk, put a pin on the corkboard there, dear friends. In fact, there is already a pin on the corkboard. Add it to that, add this notion to that pin on the corkboard. Okay. A skeptical approach encourages, yes, I already read that. And to avoid blindly accepting information or arguments without questioning their validity. Skepticism also encourages individuals to be willing to revise their belief if new evidence suggests that they are incorrect. Skepticism should not be confused with cynicism or distrust, as a skeptic is not automatically assuming that a claim is false, but rather is seeking to determine the truth based on evidence and reasoning. In this sense, skepticism is an important component of the scientific method, as it helps to ensure that claims are rigorously tested and that conclusions are based on evidence rather than intuition, preconceived notions, or authority. I am and have been, for most of my adult thinking life, a genuine skeptic. Even when it comes to things that are taken for granted, maybe especially for things that are taken for granted. So, aliens and the supposed imminent alien invasion that I've been hearing prophecies and predicted dates for being touted every year for the last 45 years. My entire conscious, aware life that I've been observing social public discourse, especially when I've been looking at the fringes of discourse, there have been people making the claim, and this is beyond the scope of my lived experience, right? A quick glance back and you'll find that in our postmodern era, this claim has cropped up again and again and again and again. Aliens are about to invade. Now, the first thing that triggers my skepticism is how laden with neurolinguistic, fear-based, manipulative programming each and every one of these claims seems to be riddled with. Just like my contention with any and all claims that such and such group over there is purely evil and up to some diabolical, nefarious plan, I'm skeptic of those claims because, as I've said many times before, human endeavors are never, ever monoliths of any pure thing, one way or the other. Good or evil, you cannot identify a human endeavor in which every single person involved is 100% one thing or another. Because no human being is ever 100% absolutist about one thing or another. And there's so many reasons to be skeptical of these claims. The simplest of which, just like biblical end-of-days prophecy, every time a prophetic date is called out, nothing really happens. The date comes and goes, no alien invasion is noted, and the theory gets recycled, repackaged, refurbished, with new dates, with new fear-mongering details, and spat back out into the world. Another thing that makes me skeptical is the sheer diversity of, extraterrestrial theory that, just like I was calling out during the early days of COVID, are kind of incompatible with each other. Some of them have Venn diagram overlaps where they dovetail, but most of them seem to be at odds with one another. And as I've pointed out, the conspiracy theory community doesn't seem to be interested in reconciling any of these desperate theories, right? They just tout them all as true, and then whichever one seems to have hit on something, that's the one they remember. Now, let's take a step back real quick. As a skeptic of conspiracy theory that has been open-mindedly observing conspiracy theory content for nearly 40 years. Like, I started having conversations like this in private and in public, on social media and in, face-to-face in the mid-'80s, right? And I've been always attempting to approach with a skeptical open mind. Here's the thing that all conspiracy theory content, regardless of subject matter or thematics, here are two things that it all has in common. Conspiracy theory content will indeed use nuggets of fact, truths and half-truths, ingredients that are verifiable, in order to hook people. And then will use thin and really stretched thin logic to connect it to absurd and often unverifiable claims. So there's all kinds of conspiracy theory, alien invasion, ideas. And some of them have things in common. Some of them don't correlate at all with each other, right? Some of the more common ones, there's an alien cover-up. Governments and organizations are hiding the the evidence of extraterrestrial life and alien encounters. For what reasons? Usually to prevent a panic or to, hide the truth of some scientific developments, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, there's a long track record of people believing that they've been individually abducted by aliens and probed and analyzed for reasons that hitherto sort of never add up to anything that makes a lot of sense, beyond the general idea of being studied. Okay, plausible. There's, of course, the variations on theories that in fact, secret alien agencies are in collaboration with world governments in order to manipulate world events for various reasons. Of course, there's the ancient alien astronauts theories that claim we've been visited in the ancient past, or that we were brought here, or that we ourselves as the human species are extraterrestrial to this planet we currently live on. And of course, whether or not they are directly tied to the overarching cloud of New World Order theories, there's always that they can, connect to. Oh, they're doing it because the New World Order is trying to establish one world government control, and somehow aliens being involved is a critical part of that. Okay. Now, like I said, and then of course, wait, before we transition, there's also the biggest deviating branch or sort of other group of theories in this collection are the ones that claim that the alien invasion is going to be fake. All right, so either we're going to be invaded by very real aliens, or our own governments, for reasons that may or may not make sense, are going to create a false flag operation of a fake alien invasion. Now, like I said, the single common thing amongst the entire vast and often wildly incoherent spectrum of conspiracy theory content is that they will indeed strategically use plausible ingredients, real ingredients, nuggets of fact, slivers of truth, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so, and then of course, it insists that anyone who disagrees is being manipulated. There is always that catch. No matter what the claim is, there's always some kind of neuro-linguistic programming that programs those who choose to believe in the content that anyone who disagrees must be mocked and ridiculed and ignored. The philosophical skeptic in me suggests that right there should disqualify any conspiracy theory content, right? If it includes neuro-linguistic programming, if it weaves facts with fiction, and if it then inculcates, manipulates, or programs believers into knee-jerk rejection without consideration of any questioning of the theory, that theory should be abdicated, abandoned. No matter how many interesting nuggets of things that are plausible or even verifiable may be in it. Now, an independent investigation of those things is, of course, necessary, right? Like, we must investigate things that can be verified. If it cannot be verified yet, we must investigate further. To be clear, friends, before we take a musical break, I have never claimed that aliens could not possibly exist. That would be an absurdly naive position to take, given what we understand about the universe, right? And we'll talk a little bit more of that on the other side of the musical break. So I'm not sitting here telling you aliens don't exist. I'm saying conspiracy theory content about aliens is suspect AF. And it should be questioned. Now, a lot of self-proclaimed conspiracy theory researchers out there will tell you, but I verify everything personally, which is an interesting claim. My immediate response is to ask them, so you've traveled to all the locations called out in the conspiracy theory content. You've personally interviewed individuals that might be eyewitnesses. You've personally gone to the places involved, to talk to the people involved, to verify that yourself with your own eyes? Let's be blunt, friends. 99.9% of the people who claim to verify the conspiracy theory content that they are promoting didn't do all that. What they actually did was utilize the same corporate algorithm that delivered them the content to look up keywords postulated by that content, to find other content. One of my largest critical concerns about conspiracy theory content is that, based on my lifetime of observations, it doesn't benefit humanity. If there is a group that it apparently benefits based on the resulting actions and behaviors of those who believe in the conspiracy theory content, it is the conspirators actually conspiring in the world. Because, despite my critical approach to conspiracy theory content, I have never once naively claimed that there is no conspiracy in the world. Of course there's corruption. Of course people in power conspire. Of course there are massive issues that must be confronted and addressed concerning world governments and people with too much money and too much power. But curiously, 60 years of postmodern conspiracy theory content has never solved anything. And despite lots of, conspiracy theory enthusiasts taking the bait and patting themselves on the back for predicting, quote unquote, something that they obviously didn't predict, but rather, something that they reposted and then they just reposted the claim that they predicted it. Despite all that, every time I've seen a prediction made, nothing really happens. I have yet to see a Super Bowl interrupted by an alien invasion. And that's been one of the popular fringy variants on alien invasion conspiracy theory for the last 30, 40 years. I think, and this is pure speculation on my part, but maybe, just maybe, psychologically, it might be tied to that movie from the 70s, and I don't have the title at the tip of my tongue, but there's an action-adventure movie about, I think, and forgive me if I'm wrong, about a potential terror attack that is to be conducted during a Super Bowl, and this film was actually filmed live during a real Super Bowl. Anyways, who knows, right? That's just me going, oh, interesting. There might be some movie that's like a cultural, phenomena that people sort of vaguely remember, that lots of people probably watched, that sort of ties into the psychology of the formulation of some of this content. Regardless, the skeptic in me sees all these wildly various claims that sometimes have nothing to do with each other, and sees this pattern of behavior, which is, people who believe in conspiracy theory, foaming at the mouth about it, categorically rejecting anyone who questions it, mocking and ridiculing those who cannot agree with it. This triggers all kinds of red flags in my open-minded, critical thinking, skepticism matrix of analysis. All right, having said all that, friends, let's take a quick musical break to cleanse the palate and come back to talk about a few more things related to this theme. Please enjoy the following audio, entertainment, literary, fictional, musical track from another dimension, created for you by an artificial robot from another planet that is a character in the book series that I'm slowly writing over on Wattpad. This track is entitled Vibratory Adjustments to the Inner Voids. So, friends, aliens must exist. Extraterrestrial civilizations must be living their lives the best they can on other planets, just like we are here on this planet. Statistically, it would be naive to assume otherwise, right? The Drake equation kind of makes it clear. Those of you who are not familiar with the Drake equation, check it out, look it up. Don't take my word for it. Do real research on your own. But here is my understanding of it based on, what I have read over the years, and of course in preparation for this podcast. The Drake equation is a mathematical formula developed by astronomer Frank Drake in the 60s. All right, and it is a theoretical equation used to sort of estimate the possible number of detectable alien civilizations that might be existing in the Milky Way. The Drake equation has 7 variables, which each of them representing different factor that would influence the possible number of detectable civilizations in the galaxy. Okay, these variables, this algorithm, or rather this it's not an algorithm, I don't think. This equation, which can be written as n equals r asterisk times fp times ne times fl times fi times fc, is just a way to theoretically calculate a possible estimate, right? Now here's what the variables mean. N, which would be the result, even though it's at the beginning of the equation, is equals the number of civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy that would have the ability to communicate with us. R asterisk is the average rate of star formation in our galaxy, right? Because that would influence how many planets would exist in the galaxy and how many planets out of those might be in the Goldilocks territory around the sun that would allow for life to develop. So FP is the fraction of those stars that have planets. NE is the average number of planets that can potentially support life for each of the stars with planets. FL represents the fraction of those planets with life, and FI represents the fraction of those planets with life that might develop intelligent life. FC equals the fraction of civilizations that might develop the technology to allow them to communicate with us over interstellar distances. So it's a useful tool for understanding the probability of extraterrestrial life. And taken as it is, the probability is relatively high. Right? Of course, it all depends on how much context we feed into it. The more number of confirmed stars that have confirmed planets that exist in the confirmed Goldilocks conditions would influence the probability up or down. The more, the higher number those variables might be in reality, the lower the probability. Or higher the probability. Lower, well, actually, I'm not sure how it would rotate. Anyways, regardless, it's a relative estimate, right? So my point being that it's extremely unlikely that we are the only life forms out there. I just want to make that clear. I'm not one of those deniers that thinks that it's impossible for aliens to exist. Now, that brings us to the Fermi paradox, which is, of course, if the likelihood is relatively high that there are aliens out there, then why haven't we encountered them in a big, overt, obvious way, right? Setting aside all the conspiracy theories about how it's all secreted or hidden away or, you know, we're being kept from the knowledge of it, purely looking at it from, you know, a scientific perspective of like, if there's aliens out there and those aliens have the ability to communicate and or visit us, why haven't we encountered something bigger, something obvious, something that like the whole world would sort of experience and that couldn't be covered up? And that's what the Fermi paradox is all about. So for those who are not aware of the Fermi paradox, and that's spelled F-E-R-M-I, paradox. It's described as a contradiction between the high probability of the existence of extraterrestrials and the lack of evidence for or obvious contact with these civilizations from our perspective. It was established by a physicist by the name of Enrico Fermi. Sounds Italian to me. who is sort of the legends attributes to him to have said, or to ask the question, quote, "Where is everybody?" During a discussion with colleagues back in 1950. So the paradox is based on the assumption that the universe is vast. Duh. It obviously is. It contains many stars and planets. Duh. It's visually clear that probably, that's going on. And that some of these stars and planets are likely to contain conditions suitable for life. Now, given the sheer size of the universe, it is reasonable to assume that many civilizations exist, right? And that several of these civilizations have probably or are in the process of developing technologies similar to our own. And that we included, so if we are, then likely they are, striving to develop those technologies to the level advanced enough to achieve interstellar communication. Okay. So obviously, there's, the public-facing scientific claims of ongoing search for evidence. And then there's the conspiracy side claiming that they're pretending and that it's all a hoax and that they've been around forever or that they're already here or that they're about to invade, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? On the purely scientific side, right, I've already addressed my concerns with all the conspiracy theory claims in the previous portion of the show. Here are some of the, to kind of round out the thoughts on the Fermi paradox. The paradox says, questions why, if it's so likely that they are out there, why haven't we encountered something really blatantly obvious and sort of impossible to debunk? There are several potential explanations that have been proposed over the years. In no particular order, one of the kind of curiously simplest ones is that scientists, including the SETI program, are not looking in the right places. Space is huge, and maybe our instrumentation is just pointing in all the wrong directions, right? Because space is so massive, it would be like pinpointing one needle in 1,000 haystacks using technology that's woefully underpowered. Okay, that's very plausible. In terms of identifying communications, right? Observing radio frequencies or some other form of energy outbursts that would be, organized and technological in nature. Now, the obvious big one that's kind of disappointing is that, extraterrestrials don't exist. While the possibility is high, maybe they just don't exist, and that's why we haven't encountered them yet in a big, obvious, impossible to deny kind of way. Then we get into sort of more nuanced possibilities. One of my favorites, because it's so dark, and I have a pretty dark sense of humor, is this. All technological civilizations eventually self-destruct. It's very, very sweetly seductive, dark theory about how dumb people are. Right? No offense. You're a people. I'm a people. And then we get into the whole idea of what is personhood and what sort of genomics is required to achieve personhood. But if we presume that life on other planets achieves personhood in a similar expression to our own, right? Not fixating on the external structural visual elements, but rather the critical ingredients of personhood. And real quick, what is personhood? I've got some notes about that over here. Personhood. Personhood is a complex and abstract concept that is generally considered to apply only to beings with advanced cognitive abilities. Now, if that doesn't sound like self-absorbed bias, I don't know what is. Such as the ability to think, feel, communicate, and make decisions. Now, despite what ChatGPT had said about personhood, which is to say, I asked ChatGPT this, right? Given what is known about genomics in general, is it reasonable to postulate that all life forms in their own way are evolving towards personhood? So, According to ChatGPT, personhood is defined by cognitive abilities such as the ability to think, feel, communicate, and make decisions. It then also reports that supposedly, in evolutionary terms, personhood as such is not actually a goal or endpoint for evolution of most species. It then defines evolution as operating through a natural selection process which favors traits that increase an organism's ability to survive and reproduce. The development of advanced cognitive abilities is a result of evolution, but is not necessarily a guaranteed outcome, of course. Now, these are all reasonable statements, and it goes on to say a bunch of things about how it's incredibly unlikely that all organisms are evolving towards personhood. I frankly am of the opposite opinion. Science, and this is, of course, an important caveat to be pointed out. I'm not a blind follower of science. I approach all scientific claims with as much skepticism as I approach conspiracy theory content. Just like I'm not blindly defending the Democratic Party when I criticize the Republican Party, which is a theme in this podcast and something that I really quite ridiculously get accused of. When I criticize conspiracy theory, I'm not axiomatically blindly defending all science. Duh, corruption happens. Money gets involved. As one meme points out, it's not follow the scientist, which is a human being which can be easily corrupted, but follow the broader science through skeptical questioning and demanding a constant reevaluation of the claims being made. Okay. So I'm of the opinion, based on emergent science, which it is entirely possible that ChatGPT is not aware of, given that it is not a live learning language model. Oh, and for those of you who are not familiar with ChatGPT, let's talk about it really quick. I've talked about it before in the episode, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again. But based on its own statements, it is what is called a past trained model, or a completed, or there's a past terminology there, and I'll try to find it in its own discussion. But it is an AI language model machine that's trying to learn language, natural language conversation skills based on a very large but openly acknowledged to be limited data set, which is only up to date to 2021. So it might not be available, or it might not be aware of the growing emergent scientific evidence that plant life appears to behaviorally display such things, such cognitive abilities as the capacity to feel, to understand its environment, to communicate with members of its species, and to make decisions. Believe it or not, look it up. One of the old school, well-established documentaries about this is The Secret Life of Plants. But there's plenty of other information out there available. Science keeps going, hey, although they don't have nervous systems, plants seem to make decisions about their environment, i.e. they identify where nutritional deposits are around them, and their roots grow towards those as opposed to arbitrarily, right? Several plants seem to communicate with their fellow plants. And I think, certain trees have evidence that they not only send electrochemical signals, which is fundamentally like how data is communicated, but they also relay nutrients when one tree has a surplus and another tree has a deficit. Now, there's, of course, plenty of ways to flatten that down and minimize it and explain it through arbitrary mechanisms. But increasingly, those dismissals become less and less satisfactory the more evidence you review that's being explored. And I'm sure there will be more groundbreaking science in that regard. Okay, so back to the Fermi paradox and some of its explanations. So technological civilizations self-destruct. And it's really, really straightforward. And it's kind of horrifying because, hello, do you see what humanity's doing to itself? It is, and I'm quoting ChatGPT in the way it explains technological civilizations self-destruct theory. It is possible that civilizations may reach a stage where they develop technologies that lead to their own destruction, either through war, environmental degradation, or some other means. Something, that obviously informs those of us who are deeply concerned about all of the uncountable, immeasurable tonnage of toxic waste that we've been dumping into our air and water and soil since the Industrial Revolution. All right. Distance and time may explain the Fermi paradox. The universe is vast, and extraterrestrial civilizations may be too far away from us, either in space or time, to be detected. Put a pin on that one because it's at the core of my critique of almost all alien invasion paranoia theory. The rare Earth hypothesis, which is, of course, sets the conditions for life are so rare and the variables are so specific that it may be possible that we are the only advanced civilization currently in existence. I'm not a fan of that. There's another one, which I do think is incredibly plausible. Extraterrestrial civilizations are simply avoiding us, right? They may be aware of our existence and deliberately avoiding communication with us on a grand, overt, obvious scale. Who knows why? Maybe because of something like the what's the Prime Directive? Is that what it's called in Star Trek? Like non-interference protocols, right? Or it might be because we're abysmally embarrassing at our level of development. They're like, we're not going to get involved until they figured some more shit out. That one I love because it's got a lot of cynicism about humanity. There's another one called the Great Filter, and it's an idea that a series of barriers or filters that civilization must overcome in order to develop and survive. The Fermi paradox could be a result of these filters. Now, these are unknown filters, things we ourselves have not discovered about living in the universe and attempting to become intergalactic spacefaring civilization, which we may soon discover as we venture further and further out into space. Okay, so where do I want to jump next to? I've asked a lot of questions. Okay, friends, here we go. As I posted this morning on social media, I think it was this morning, and I think I put in the description for this episode, Occam's razor. Just like skepticism, it's a powerful and useful tool that so many people obviously are either unaware of or just blatantly choose to ignore. For those of you who are not familiar, no judgment, here's what it means. Occam's razor, spelled O-C-C-A-M apostrophe S, razor, R-A-Z-O-R, is a principle in philosophy and science that states that when presented with multiple explanations for a phenomena, and this is, of course, for those of you who, just for clarity, this is how it is presented. This is what ChatGPT presented to me when I asked it. And of course, I've been aware of Occam's razor for as long, forever. It's one of the fascinating things I stumbled across a long time ago that informed my skepticism. When presented with multiple explanations for a phenomena, the simplest explanation is usually the one most likely to be correct. This principle is named after the 14th century logician. How do you call that? It's spelled L-O-G-I-C-I-A-N. Logician. A person who studies logic and practices it. And Franciscan friar William Occam, which is actually spelled O-C-K-H-A-M. He's credited with being the originator of this principle. The idea behind Occam's razor is that given a set of possible explanations for a phenomena, the explanation with the fewest number of assumptions or postulates is most likely to be correct. This idea is based on the idea that all things being equal, the simplest explanation has to be the most possible. It's often used in science as a, quote, heuristic guide to the process of hypothesis formation and testing. By starting with the simplest explanation and only adding complexity if necessary, scientists and self-proclaimed theorists can avoid postulating unnecessary and untestable concepts. Right? I bring this to the argument about Satanism, okay? To sort of connect some dots with various episodes. We've talked about this before, and we'll talk about it again. Accusing others of being pure evil themselves or being servants of pure evil is the oldest known human tool for psychological manipulation in history. Tribal leaders says to their followers, hey, that tribe over there is in league with this demon or that demon, or they are demons themselves. Let's go destroy them. Nonsense, right? So let me get back to some of these things that is important to consider about Occam's razor. It's not a hard and fast rule, but a guiding principle that can help evaluate a hypothesis, right? Obviously, in some cases, more complexity is necessary to fully explain a phenomenon. It's important to understand that the principle does not dictate. It does not dictate that the simplest explanation is always the correct one, but rather that it is the most likely to be correct, given all the available information. So, I don't use it as a blind rejection tool, but as a skeptic's, measuring system. Like, let's pause and really think about what would explain this more simply, right? And of course, those explanations are often immediately rejected as the cover-up excuses being used by the evil, nefarious overlords that are trying to keep us in the dark. Obviously, that's to someone already buying into conspiracy theory and the paranoia-inducing psychological manipulative neurolinguistic content in it. Of course, that makes perfect sense, right? But I asked, GPT, and some of these are already aware of, and some of these I wasn't. But I asked GPT, what are some naturally occurring phenomena that could be misidentified as UFOs? Known meteorological phenomena, right? And of course, people mock this all the time. But ball lightning, clouds, mirages, and other often electrostatic or electromagnetic phenomena can be misidentified. Astronomical phenomena, stars, planets, and satellites, seen by the naked eye and misunderstood to be something else. And the simplest, man-made objects, right? And the reason I'm talking about this, of course, is that in the lead up to the Super Bowl this weekend, there was this spur of activity over the American skies that began with the identification and eventual shooting down of a Chinese balloon of some manufacturing. China openly admitted it was theirs, claimed it was a weather balloon. The United States says, yes, we believe that China created it. We think it was manufactured by such and such industrial complex vendor, and we suspect that it was being used for spying. And then a few more. I'm not entirely clear if it was 2 or 3 or more objects, because there's been multiple statements being made. And of course, the iterations of when people talk about it kind of get confusing. But several objects, let's say 3, have been shot down from the sky since. Now, of course, this is an appealing thing to go down and then be used to tout alien conspiracy theory. But again, let's apply Occam's razor really quickly. Let's say, for argument's sake, let's say aliens are here. my skeptical mind contemplates the following issues, right? For aliens to be here, their species must be exponentially more technologically advanced than we are, right? For various reasons. And let's talk about this real quick. Space travel isn't easy. Let me see where there's something really important that a lot of people just ignore. That I'm actually surprised. Was it part of the Fermi paradox? Well, it was sort of folded in and not identified in the great filter and the distance time explanations. But where's the note? Hold on a second. Wait for me one moment. Where is this one asked question? I asked it. No, that's too far. Where? It must be further up in this conversation. Pardon me. I'm so sorry. I tried to get somewhat organized for this discussion, and one of the things I'm going to be doing, as I talked about in an earlier episode, is I'm going to take my thoughts, ideas, questions, and in order to have somewhat of a conversational tone, I'm going to ask ChatGPT for its ideas on this. Here we go. Okay, so for me, this is one of the simplest and most obvious obstacles or filters, or whatever you want to call it. And one of the simplest reasons why the idea that aliens are visiting us is it's extremely unlikely. Impossible? No, but extremely unlikely. And I've talked about this before, but I wanted to see what kind of level of scientific detail ChatGPT might be able to add to my own understanding of it. So I asked it the following question. Mind you, I didn't come up with this just because it said it. I've considered this for a very, very, very long time. It's a well-established observation-based thesis about it's a cosmological thesis based on observation. Here's the question I asked ChatGPT. Please explain in scientific detail the fact that the universe is spreading apart, all points getting farther away from each other, and how that would make intergalactic travel nearly impossible. So it responds, the universe is expanding, and this expansion means that all points in the universe are getting farther and farther away from each other. This idea was first proposed by Belgian astronomer Georges Lemaître in 1927. It ain't some newfangled thing, and it isn't something I made up, which I've been accused of doing by people when I present this to them in regards to alien invasion theory. And then later confirmed by observations of distant galaxies and their relative velocities. According to our current understanding of physics, this expansion is a consequence of what is, of course, labeled the Big Bang Theory, which many people refuse to even contemplate as possibly true, and which I don't accept on its face because I think it's a tiny little sliver of a larger piece of the puzzle. But put a pin on the corkboard and we'll talk about that. I think but to give you, you're probably wondering, what do you mean by that? Here's what I mean. Big Bang Theory is incomplete because I don't think, to the best of my recollection, my understanding of it and all the versions I've read about it so far, because it has gone through some iterations in its time, it does not, as of yet, take into account fractal recursion. Now, I don't know that I doubt I'm the only person saying this, and I doubt I'm the first person saying this, and I have noticed that other people have begun to point this out. But put a pin up on the corkboard. Fractal recursion, right? Fractalism or fractal reality, or the fractal nature, the holographic fractal nature of the cosmos. We've talked about it before on the show, so you can find some episodes about that. Check them out. We'll talk about it again on the show. I might even stumble into talking about it some more in this episode. Okay. So, Big Bang Theory, I'm not a blind proponent of it, and I have some critiques and some suggestions about it. But let's move on. For those who may not be aware, the Big Bang Theory states that the universe began as a singularity and has been expanding ever since. Now, I'm not here to argue the Big Bang Theory, and like I just stipulated, I don't think it is absolutely correct in and of itself. It's missing several possible things that could be incorporated into it. Most importantly, holographic fractal recursion. Okay, but given all that, and for our purposes, including the fractal recursion that I'm stipulating here, we can proceed with the following. The expansion of the universe has several implications for intergalactic travel, both our own and of any other theoretical space-traveling species out there. One major issue is that the distances between objects in the universe are constantly increasing, and not just at a steady rate, but at an exponentially increasing rate. All right? Thus, making travel to other galaxies exponentially increasingly difficult. To put it in perspective, even if we were able to travel at the speed of light, which is theoretically possible, but currently not technologically available to us, we haven't figured out how that would work, really. We've got some theories going, etc. So even if we had the ability to travel at the speed of light, it would take us more than 2 million years to reach the closest galaxy to our own, the Andromeda Galaxy, right? And arguably, maybe even more, because we may not be 100% accurate in how quickly the 2 points in space may be traveling apart from each other. This makes intergalactic travel nearly impossible with our current theoretical technology and understanding of physics, right? Which would be true of any other people-like civilization, intelligent civilization that has achieved personhood. Another challenge posed by the expansion of the universe is that it creates a limit to the amount of energy, and this one's one that's even rarer than the straightforward obstacle of the physical expansion of space, right? It creates a limit to the amount of energy and resources that can be harnessed for intergalactic travel. All right, why? Let's answer that question. According to the laws of thermodynamics, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be converted from one form or another. And we see this in nuclear bombs, right? Energy can neither... Oh, we already read that. As a result of this scientific principle, which maintains to be verifiable and repeatable... Oh, sorry, I didn't mute that. Boop, that's my phone. I'm getting text messages. As a result of the energy required for intergalactic travel... Wait, hold on. Where was I? According to the laws of thermodynamics, energy can either be created or destroyed, only converted from one form to another. As a result, the energy required for intergalactic travel would have to be obtained from the spacecraft's surroundings, right? Making it increasingly difficult to obtain the necessary energy as the distances between objects in the universe continue to increase. In other words, as it runs out of gas or fuel of whatever kind, obviously gas is a loaded term because we're talking about petroleum-based substance, but as it runs out of fuel of whatever kind it's using, it would have to gather more from its surroundings. And all of its surroundings, as it travels, are exponentially spreading away from it, the spaceship. So not only is the destination getting further and further and further away, even if it's traveling at the speed of light, right? The destination's getting further and further and further away. So eventually, like, a boundary occurs. We hit a paradoxical boundary where no matter how fast you're going, you're going to run out of fuel, and the distance you've traveled will be dwarfed by the remaining distance. In addition, because everyone's like, oh, well, all they need to do is here's what the people who are savvy that I've talked to about this that get it have always said, wow, well, that's what wormholes and faster than light travel fixes. But there's a caveat. In addition, the expansion of the universe has implications for the very fabric of space and time, according to ChatGPT's response right here. According to Einstein's theory of general relativity, the expansion of the universe causes the fabric of space-time to stretch, potentially causing it to become unstable and preventing the formation of stable wormholes that could have otherwise been used for faster than light travel. In conclusion, ChatGPT says, the expansion of the universe presents numerous challenges to intergalactic travel, making it nearly impossible with our current technology and understanding of physics. The increasing distances between objects in the universe, the limitations posed by the limits of thermodynamics, and the potential instability of space-time all make intergalactic travel a daunting and unlikely prospect for us in the immediate future. Okay. That must also be true of other species approaching spacefaring status. Now, does any of that make it impossible for them to be here? Of course not. I'm no fool. And that's why I understand why all of these various alien theories are so attractive. But there's always these obstacles that get in the way for me as a skeptic for buying into them blindly, as I've spelled out. I asked, as a matter of fact, just to see what he would spit out, I asked ChatGPT the following question. Taking Occam's razor into account, what might be the most reasonable explanations for UFO sightings? It responded, when applying Occam's razor to the phenomena of UFO sightings, the simplest explanation is usually that they are misidentifications of natural or man-made objects or phenomena. For example, many UFO sightings could be explained as aircraft, weather phenomena, or other natural or man-made objects that are misidentified by observers. Additionally, many UFO sightings can be explained as hoaxes, in which people deliberately create or falsify evidence of a UFO sighting. This can be done for a variety of reasons, including attention-seeking, financial gain, or for the purposes of spreading misinformation. Bum, bum, bum. Who benefits from conspiracy theory content? Really? I am going to stand by this until I see evidence otherwise, but based on my lifetime of observation, critical thinking, questioning, asking questions, engaging in discussion with people who believe conspiracy theory, and observing the collective activities and behavior to the limited ability for me to observe, because obviously I can't be everywhere all at once, the group most likely to be benefiting from wildly diverse, often conflicting conspiracy theory content about any subject, especially taken as a broad, overarching look at all conspiracy theory content, the most likely group to be benefiting from the existence of the content, from the distribution of the content, from the believing in the content by people. Therefore, the argumentation of the content between people who buy into it and people who question it and have reasons to not buy into it, the group that benefits most clearly is whatever conspiracy is actually going on, which the conspiracy theories claim to be exposing. 60 plus years of the postmodern conspiracy theory movement as we know it today, and how many problems have been solved? In my humble opinion, 0. ChatGPT goes on, that was all me, since I broke off from the ChatGPT response. Let's resume. ChatGPT goes on to point out, it is important to note that the vast majority of UFO sightings can be explained by these simpler explanations, Occam's razor, and that there is currently no credible evidence to support the idea that UFO sightings are evidence of extraterrestrial life or advanced technology. While it is always possible that some UFO sightings might represent a yet unexplained phenomena, until there is more concrete evidence to support this idea, most reasonable explanation is that they are misidentifications or hoaxes. And, quite frankly, a lot of the photographic evidence presented in conspiracy theory content about aliens, regardless of the thesis, has often, to my eyes, looked like obvious Photoshop when it comes to the photographs, right? Now, there are other instances where it clearly doesn't look like Photoshop. I'm thinking of some of the declassified imagery that was put out in recent years by our own government. I'm thinking of a particular piece of video footage. I don't have it in front of me. I don't have citations. I apologize. This just comes to mind. It's coming through me in flow. But there was a grainy black and white video. I don't remember if it was supposed to have been shot by some sort of, Air Force pilot or by a spy drone or what. But it depicts a grainy black and white background and distinctly like void-like, sometimes quite curiously toroidal shape. There's a lot of things that could be, including electromagnetic interference. That, to me, is way more reasonable than an object. Now, could that electromagnetic interference be being generated by a mechanical object? Of course. But could it be being created by naturally phenomenological occurrences? Also a strong possibility. There's some synergy here in an alternative theory attempting to explain, what are they called? Crop circles, right? Not to deviate. Crop circles, sometimes affiliated with alien theory, sometimes not. There's a lot of explanations, but the explanations to crop circles that makes the most sense to me is naturally occurring, although extremely rare, electromagnetic phenomena. For all the reasons that makes sense to me. Now, we can have a whole other episode about that, which maybe we shall. I'd have to go back and find some of the documentation where I remember that they talk about how naturally occurring electromagnetic waveform toroidal, like dust devils or tornadoes of electro, and I'm borrowing climatological terminology, right, to give a visual idea, that this would way more readily explain the physical evidence that's consistently observed in the crop circles that are obviously not hoaxes. One of the problems with crop circle discussion is that there's plenty of evidence that a percentage of crop circles are obviously man-made. For example, there was a pair of brothers exposed for making fake crop circles using pretty simple techniques, including having planks of wood, tied to their feet or attached to their feet and walking around in geometric shapes in the crop circles. But one of the fascinating things that I'm remembering from memory about the evidence that I've come across over the years for a plausible explanation of crop circles is the distension of the joints of particular kinds of grain that like these knuckle joints that occur in the plants are oddly distended. And the most scientifically plausible explanation for that has to do with the generation of very highly focused heat through friction. And the fact that these reeds then are also sort of curiously woven together, which would be really difficult to do by hand, but would make a lot of sense and would kind of flow organically in a toroidal electromagnetic pattern, spinning in really specific ways as it emerges from the ground. Okay, but that's a whole nother episode. We can go back, we can put a pin on the corkboard. I don't remember if I've done that topic specifically before, or if I've only sort of stumbled into it as a sidebar. Pentultimately, though, I guess we should put in a little musical break as we kind of round out the hour. We've been rambling for quite a bit. There's one simple thing at the end of it all that I find, kind of makes it highly implausible for me that the events that just happened are indicative of an alien invasion. And we'll talk about them on the other side of this musical track. Please enjoy Nameless Instinct's Recursive Something. The title gets cut off. That's right, friends. You can enjoy all of the deep protection photographs that the imaginary DJZ and myself have created by heading on over to ZenCast and Paratrack Mr. Zeppo. If you'd like to explore all the other dimensions of the Zeppoverse, please head on over to solo.co/Mr. Zeppo to jump around and give yourself a guide. And character concept designs for other fictional characters from the literary book series you've yet to read, known as the Zeppo. Okay, friends, let's say goodbye to DJZ. I was supposed to have been doing that during the promo talk. So sorry. I forgot to put my finger on the screen and slide it down. Thank you so much, DJZ. You can take a break. We're about to wrap this up. Friends, if I was going to take Occam's razor and file it down to its sharpest, most deeply cutting point, it's this question. Why hasn't it happened yet? And I know that sounds like an absurdly simple question. And whenever I've asked it, people have jumped to all kinds of interesting, backpedaling rationalizations, which to me all resemble the same recycling, repackaging, and regurgitating of conspiracy theory content whenever the goalposts need to be moved. I asked the same question of everyone, of all the Bible thumpers telling me to get ready for the apocalypse and how I'm going to be left behind in the rapture. Why hasn't it happened yet? It's been predicted and prophesied on multiple dates every year that I've been alive. And arguably, on multiple occasions, it was supposed to have happened and didn't since the beginning of biblical prophecy. Okay? So for 3,000 some odd years, or probably even more, because I'm fairly certain that rapture and apocalypse and end of days and the coming of wrathful judgment is not particular or specific or exclusive to the Christian religion, right? Just like hyper-vilifying, objectifying, and dehumanizing others is one of the oldest known ways to manipulate followers into committing acts of violence against those you dictate are the bad guys, so is the fear-based, paranoia-inducing claim that we are about to be annihilated by some hitherto unknown force, whether it's the armies of Satan or alien invasion, right? Biblical apocalypse. Why hasn't it happened yet? If the prophecy claimed it was supposed to happen every year going back to the origins of the prophecy. Why hasn't it happened yet? Why hasn't it happened yet in a totally blunt, totally obvious, totally unavailable, totally undebunkable way, right? Because whenever I spend time thinking about aliens and all the various theories and the possible realities that could be going on, I'm left with the following conclusion. If aliens, theoretically speaking, were to travel here, A, the technological advances required to overcome all the obstacles we've just discussed would be so advanced that it would be incredibly unlikely that their probes and spacecrafts would be A, detectable by our puny human technology, and B, destroyable by our puny human weapons. Whether they're coming here to help us or to shield us from outside dangers we're not aware of, which is one of the nice benign theories about aliens out there, that the reason that we sort of think that they're around is because they're shielding us from something else, another species that's trying to take over the universe, etc., etc. No matter what reason, benign, nefarious, or good, if an alien species were here, or trying to get here, or already here, their technology would be so effing advanced that what happened this week would not be what happened this week, right? That alone makes it seem to me that the most likely explanation for the objects shot down over the past few days is that they're man-made spy technology apparatuses, right? And not alien spacecraft. Because if there was an alien invasion force pulling up to our planet, A, I think they could probe us and study us without even needing to send objects into our atmosphere. You know, because their technology would be so much more mind-bogglingly advanced than ours. They would have tools and mechanisms for study that wouldn't require flimsy little spacecrafts that our dinky, puny bombs can shoot down or destroy. And secondly, they'd already be, if they were already here, they'd be well into their invasion by now. If they were a nefarious force here to destroy us all, to take our resources, they'd be knee-deep in our corpses by now. But they're not. Of course, there's all those like gray area theories about how there's some prolonged nefarious plan to slowly manipulate us towards some ambiguously evil trajectory. But those don't make sense, and when questioned, you know, they tend to kind of fall apart because the fundamental thing is if they would have already done it already. I'm reminded of some FEMA theories from way back in the early 80s. It's one of my earliest encounters with the conspiracy theory. People foaming at the mouth, paranoid as all hell, that FEMA, an emergency, the federal emergency, what does FEMA mean? FEMA meaning? FEMA definition? No. The Federal Emergency Management Agency. There we go. Okay. So, for those of you who may not be aware, hello, welcome to the conspiracy theory nonsense, you Johnny-come-latelys. Back in the 80s and early 90s, there was a wildly popular conspiracy theory going around that FEMA was going to be used by the American government against its own civilians to wipe a bunch of us out. For reasons that were never fully explained other than it was required by some grander nefarious plan. Why aren't we dead yet? Curiously, that conspiracy theory tended to, after many years of failing to come true, it just sort of shrank and shriveled and was forgotten. And now, and this is dark, and I apologize for it, and it's a little blunt. How many conspiracy theory, self-proclaimed, and mind you, point of order, friends, for those of you who are not aware, when I use the term conspiracy theorist, I'm not inherently using it in a pejorative, dismissive, or judgmental way. Plenty of people out there go out of their way to declare themselves as self-proclaimed conspiracy theorists. That's how I use the term. Right? Just like I refuse to use the term scientist in a biasly, negatively presumed to be evil and corrupt kind of way. There is corruption. And one of the funniest things about conspiracy theorists is that they point out corruption everywhere except in their own content. But I've talked about that enough. Where was I? Oh, right. So this conspiracy theory that FEMA's going to all kill us all was wildly popular and then sort of withered away. How many conspiracy theorists that either were involved in spreading that conspiracy theory around back then, or that would have bought into it today, are currently, right now, receiving financial and or physical aid from FEMA? I bet that number is a lot higher than most self-proclaimed conspiracy theorists would care to admit, given the mind-bogglingly huge amount of chaos and destruction caused by recent weather and climatological events. Right? How many conspiracy theorists out there that that did believe or used to believe or would have believed that FEMA's going to kill us all is now being rescued from horrible, tragic circumstances by FEMA? Now, I'm not blindly defending federal agencies, yo. Of course there's corruption in government. There's always corruption in human endeavors. I'm not denying that. There's obvious and blatantly massive amounts of evidence for corruption in all organized religion. Right? Now, does that mean I'm going to judge all believers and keepers of faith? No. But I am going to challenge anyone willing to hear me out to question the ideological constructs of their organized religion. Just like I encourage politicos and ardent, fervent supporters of politicians on both sides of whatever political aisle you're on, whether it's the American left-right dichotomy or, any other governments out there in the world, to question the ideology. Question the claims. Constantly question. So here we are, friends. FEMA didn't kill us all. I have not been left behind by the rapture. And like I posted, I generated several marked safe from memes recently. I am marked safe from being, impacted by any of the claims made about the Grammys, about the halftime show at the football game, and I've survived every supposed date of predicted apocalypse or alien invasion that's coming around. So now, does that mean that it's never going to happen, I realize that something could, consistently not happen for a very long time and then happen. But until it does, I'm going to, continue to apply skepticism, critical thinking, and open-minded evaluation of as much of the evidence as and I'm quite limited in my capacity, I'm the first to admit, quite limited in my capacity to go out there and independently verify any of this. So I am reliant on others who have, in theory, independently verified this, and the collective aggregate cohesion of such independent verification, right? I mean, that's how the scientific method works, both in principle and in action, setting aside all known corruption, right? So, full circle, my friends, I humbly invite everyone to take a big, deep breath, check their paranoia at the door, and use sound, skeptical, Occam's razor, critical thinking, questioning skills before blindly agreeing to any theory that has a track record of never quite happening the way it's been predicted. And, and as we've seen in other thematic areas, right? Primarily a lot of the conspiracy theory content related to COVID. I love bringing this up because people just want to go, I don't care, I don't remember, I don't want to think about it. People in the COVID camp, in the COVID conspiracy theory camp. When all of that began, there was a massive explosion of conspiracy theory, which makes sense because there's going to be starter seed conspiracy theory content being propagated by the mysteriously hard to discover, hard to find sources out there in the dark corners of the web. And then people are going to pick it up and start speculating on their own. I lost count of separate, incongruent conspiracy theory statements at over 50. And by that I mean I saw at least 50 different conspiracy theory claims about what was really going on, about what was really going to happen. Some of those contained ingredients that were not really all that secretive and were not really all that revealing, like medical IDs and digital IDs and the development of mRNA. mRNA was not some secret thing that was never heard of until COVID happened, yo. mRNA research has been going on for over 20 years. Now, whether you like it or don't like it, agree with it or disagree with it, it's been around and it's been openly discussed by scientists in public domain for quite some time. Curiously, conspiracy theory took that, wrapped it up in a little bit of nonsense, and people suddenly believed that it was a top secret thing that suddenly was coming out of nowhere. Plenty of claims that mRNA does stuff that everyone involved in its development says it cannot do. Now, I'm not blindly defending mRNA vaccines, my friends. The jury is still out. And that's a whole nother episode anyways. And I've already said most of what I've got to say about COVID and conspiracy theories about COVID in the past in real time. If you're curious and interested, go check them out. There's 6 years worth of podcast episodes you can explore. And friends, there's no one way to do it. Jump around. I humbly invite you to listen to as many episodes as possible. Keep an open mind. Ask your own critical thinking questions. Bring your skepticism to the table. Right? I'm not here to pontificate and have people just blindly agree with me. So please join the community. Come on down to the Facebook page for the Almost Daily ZenCast. Come on down to the headquarters for the Almost Daily ZenCast over at Spreaker.com/show/ZenCast. Sign up, join the community, leave your comments, ask your questions. All I ask, all I stipulate is that you leave hate-mongering and other such pointless tactics at the door. Because if all you want to do is fight and call me names, that's adorable, and I've already responded to that and I'll shut you down in the same way. But if you want to ask real serious questions and have an honest discussion about it, I'm game. I don't pretend to know anything. I'm just sharing my observations as an independent critical thinker with a bit of a skepticism hat on, and my exploration of these things in my own limited way over nearly 30 years. All right, friends, as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. This show is exclusively made possible by listeners by you, like you, right? Thank you for listening. Please listen to more. Please like and share and redistribute it, because the more people listen, the more I can focus on this and my other content creation projects without struggling to get by week to week, month to month. Namaste, friends, and may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. Remember, much more important than arguing about which conspiracy theory is true is the calling to heal ourselves and facilitate the healing of each other. Because we will never solve any of the very real, very undeniable problems that we face as a collective species until we do that collective healing work, so that we can effectively collaborate with one another across ideological boundaries and free of political gerrymandering of our minds. And if you think that's crazy, if that idea triggers you, you might want to ask yourself why. I only bring that up because people point it out to me every once in a while that my questions and statements trigger that. And I'm like, well, don't get mad at me. Triggers are signals for us to look within and ask ourselves, why are we getting triggered? And then pursue that line of self-investigation until we identify that which needs healing. Until next time, friends, I've been your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And that is what I've got to say about that. As always, thank you kindly for listening. This has been the Almost Daily ZenCast with your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. Just to close on the full circle thought, I realize with every sentence I say, I could be dead wrong, absolutely categorically wrong. I just humbly implore that all those out there that would argue and tell me that I'm wrong to question their own theories in the same way and be willing to acknowledge and accept that they could be totally categorically wrong as well. Otherwise, we're not having a conversation from a place of intellectual honesty, in my humble opinion.